Welcome to VeloUnlocked, the podcast for baseball players that want to play at the next level. Today we're joined by Adam Moreau, president of baseball and co-founder of FlexPro Grip. He is a former collegiate baseball player with a background in business, economics, and finance. After an injury ended his playing career, Adam became a CSCS and opened the New Orleans Sports Performance Institute with his father. Through their research and problem-solving approach, Adam and his father developed FlexPro Grip, a grip testing and training device paired with a mobile app. This patent-pending device measures finger and wrist strength, endurance, and rate of force development to target muscles and tendons for improved arm health and performance. FlexPro Grip has collaborated with professional organizations such as the San Diego Padres, as well as collegiate programs like Virginia Tech and Wake Forest. The accompanying app provides personalized workouts and tracks training history to optimize arm health and development, reducing the risk of UCL, elbow injuries, and enhancing spin rate and ball movement.
Adam, listen, thank you for taking this far trip all the way out here. And, yesterday we got the opportunity to, really have an offline chat and dig through, FlexPro Grip and, get an understanding of really how it works and what its potential is. But before we get into everything that is so great about that product, let's talk about you and how you got here, what your background is, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Of course, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Any excuse to hop a flight up here isn't the worst thing in the world. But my start, like everybody else in this industry, was as a baseball player. Mm-hmm. I played for as long as I could. And like the majority of us, I had injury ultimately take it away from me. So one of the things that I was always passionate about, no matter what I did coming off of my playing career, is I really wanted to make sure that injury would not be the determining factor in somebody's fate in this game. So that's what drove me really to get into performance and coaching. So I came to that classic crossroads at the end of my career. I'm a week removed from what I wasn't sure was my last game yet. Of, all right, well, off season, got to get ready for pro ball. What am I going to do? Am I going to coach guys or am I going to train guys? Do I want to join a staff? Do I want to start my own training company? And I sat down with my dad and I knew I had to do my own rehab for my shoulder if I really was going to get ready for these indie ball contracts I had on the table. And it was just natural, like, well, I'm going to be training people, or I'm going to be training myself. Might as well train people along with me.
Right.
So my dad and I embarked on creating a training facility, ran with that for a while. And to attract people, we knew what we needed to do was set ourselves apart by digging into the research and the science, because I'm a 5'11" dude with super average athleticism with a huge passion to work hard and get better at baseball.
Sure.
So my greatest skill set was going to be, I was relatively smart and driven to learn.
Yeah.
And my dad was pretty much the same way as a basketball player. So we combined that to grow our own business, just founded in the science and the research. And like, it's not like we're doctors or anything. Like, I went to business school. So did my dad. Like, we just got good at reading and finding what's available for free online and ultimately applied that to our athletes. And one of the things that stuck out for us right away was this huge impact of grip strength on performance. There's this really cool study that was done with some little leaguers in Japan, ages 6 to 16, and the highest correlation to throwing velocity and exit velocity of those kids ages 6 to 16 was grip strength. And it was a 0.91 correlation.
Wow.
And a 1 correlation is breathing to being alive. So we're like, oh crap, like this is massive. We should lean into this. We should look at it. So the JUCO baseball team that we were training, we recreated the exact same study. We did our best. And what we had with our JUCO guys was a 0.63 correlation from grip strength to throwing velocity and a 0.61 correlation from grip strength to swing speed. And it was the exact same top 2, grip strength had the highest correlation to throwing and exit velocity. And we knew we were on to something with grip. So it was always in the back of our mind. And then thankfully, like getting to have these conversations as we grew and we became more passionate about training athletes, we ultimately went down the road of trying to figure out how grip can impact what athletes do. And then we came to this crossroads again that we didn't even know we were going to happen upon, but we were just trying to get more athletes to come train with us during a summer program. I mean, you know how it is. Your guys are coming back from college. They're trying to figure out where to train. The industry has grown and guys have begun to recognize maybe playing isn't always the best option for me. So if we can create that competition in-house where guys can grow and still get live reps or connect with a local league, which is what we tried to do. So you look across the board and you have your shoulder guys, you have your knee guys, you have your back guys. We looked at it like, well, nobody's an elbow guy. Let's see if we can be the elbow facility. So we set out on a mission in 2018 to try to figure out why UCLs tear. Because we looked around and there wasn't good information. We figured there could be a 4-week run where we just like throw out a couple blog posts or like send some emails and get people coming in to train with us. And what was a 4-week plan turned out to be a 4-year project to build FlexPro Grip.
Wow.
Because we quickly realized the industry had nothing concrete to say why UCLs tear and how to prevent that from happening.
So, 4-week plan that turned into 4-year project. Let's backtrack. Let's go back to that very first study you're talking about. When we're talking about grip strength too, just so that people can get a good idea, how were they testing that grip strength?
So that was with the traditional hand grip dynamometer that you've done at whatever, any physical therapy clinic. Anytime you've gone into a performance training facility.
That right across the screen.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So that whole hand squeeze with the thumb over it too.
Yep.
So at the time that was truly the industry standard.
Sure.
And it's crazy to think that those hand grip dynamometers are $700 when you buy them new, and all they do is spin a little dial and tell you how much you're squeezing with. So that's what they tested with. And for us, that's what we ran with for so long.
So then I guess the real conundrum there, right? So before you even embark on like, hey, how do we solve UCLs, right? Or at least learn why they're occurring, right? Because that's what you have to do first before you worry about how to solve it. Then like, okay, grip seems to be correlated to success, or at least metrics that would then deem this person successful, right? Then the question becomes why, right? Like, why is grip so impactful, or at least why is it so well correlated? And then it's, hey, is just training the grip what's important, or is it the mechanisms that ultimately improve that is important, or is it, what lays into that, right? Because, as we look into any of the literature on actual grip, right, we ages 6 to 16, right? We're roughly, what are we learning there? Well, we're learning that the people who have the highest grip strength probably have the most force output too. Right?
Without a doubt.
Probably are the strongest athletes there as well.
When you're the strongest in a prepubescent group,
right,
you are far and away going to be the best athlete.
Yeah.
Which is why we wanted to recreate it with that college group or the JUCO group.
It's so cool that it dropped from roughly about 30%, right?
Right, because as you get older, what you would hope, kinematic sequencing begins to matter more. Mechanics begin to matter more. The way we move, the way we create force, those things begin to matter more. And I want to go back on the point that you brought up of like what leads to that like traditional grip strength measure. Why does that matter so much, or what can we learn from it? I mean, that was part of our learning process too. Like at first we're thinking like, oh, grip, like let's chase it. Let's see what it does. And just because you can grip longer or grip harder, it doesn't mean that your performance is going to improve. But a traditional grip strength measure, like why that really matters so much is it's a pretty good indicator of how you can create upper body tension or stiffness and how quickly you can produce it.
Right. So there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, I do want to mention, like, this is an amazing story, and I'm not sure if like people truly appreciate that, because this is actually how industries get pushed forward. It's when very curious people try and solve very difficult problems, right? It's not when people just flash fancy things across the screen and media and this and that and talk all these hoop dreams, but like when you're out there curiously trying to solve very difficult problems, that's how industries get advanced. And I commend you guys for that. And
thank you.
I'm super excited to get to the rest of this, because we're going to learn, a lot more about, where this is headed. But unpacking your last statement there, where it's a very good indication of how much force the upper body can elicit, and then also how fast it can elicit it, right? So these traditional original dynamometers didn't give us any time to peak force or anything like that. And we now have some new digital ones out there, right, that can do these processes. And I know this is part of FlexPro Grip too, as well, where it can give us time to peak force. But I think so people can understand that's the speed at which I'm actually creating the contraction or eliciting force on an object, right? Mm-hmm. And that is purely neuromuscular. And I think what's also really cool about those younger kids, when you look at traditionally a large group of younger kids, the systemic lifestyle is going to tend to be, especially in a centralized area, right? So like same town, same area, all that is going to be somewhat normalized. As you age, those systemic patterns, right? Your habits and everything, sleep, diet, all those things start to drastically change, and you start to branch off, right? Especially at a JUCO, you probably have kids from all over the country there, right? They've been raised in totally different households, all this and that. And I think what's so interesting is not only should the force have equated out, but the variability of systemic health would have probably expanded. So now your neuromuscular capacity, right, the speed at which you can create that signal is probably very different amongst all of them, which is also just really cool in terms of, why grip can be so, I guess, illuminating to what is going on in the athlete.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is so cool about grip testing is, yes, you do need a device or something mechanical to do it, but it doesn't take up space. So as opposed to like med ball testing or jump testing or sprint testing, you need some space to do it. So I think it's really cool that you can take something handheld and get a really good indication of where your body stands to produce force on a given day.
Yeah. So, let's lead into that, right? Let's dive into a little bit more of what FlexPro Grip can do now and how that differs from just the traditional dynamometer, right? Because you just mentioned what we can do on a given day. And I think that's so crucial, right? As we have young athletes who always, one of their first things we ask is, in like meeting them and part of our admissions process is, hey, what's your level of experience in a weight room? And immediately they divert to like, oh, well, my max is this and my max is that. And, I fire back with, oh yeah, on what day and how often? Because that's the truth of the matter is, right? They could have been highly prepared for that day, highly ready or whatever, or not, and just have never actually achieved what that could be. But so let's go into the different facets of, what the intention behind FlexPro Grip is, and then what you're trying to illuminate to people.
Right. So kind of going back to the story that we talked about earlier, FlexPro Grip originally started as having the goal of a solution, right? We didn't embark on this to create a device. We saw a problem. The problem was UCL tears. And it's happening systemically across the board in professional baseball, college baseball, high school and youth baseball. The problem is growing and growing, and whatever reason you want to say or attribute to that issue, so be it. Anybody can have whatever argument that they want to have. Regardless, we know it is a problem, and we wanted to be part of that solution. So that's where all of this started. And we know that in simplifying it all, there are 3 muscles that are best positioned to offload some of that stress that the elbow experiences.
Sure.
And there are 3 total structures that handle that force in the elbow. It's the UCL itself, it's the bones colliding on the backside of the elbow, and then it's those 3 muscles. Mm-hmm. And we look at what we can actually train. We're not training our bones. We're not training the ligament. So we can train the muscles.
Right.
So that's why we designed the device the way that we did. We wanted to be able to target those 3 specific muscle tendon units, sparing everyone like the fancy Latin names.
Well, I mean, yeah, listen, here we can summarize that quickly in just the idea that a ligament doesn't have any contractile units in it, right? So it doesn't expand and contract based on a nerve innervating it, right? It's going to stretch and expand based on other actions pulling along it, right? The 3 muscles you're mentioning aid in the stabilization of the elbow and sort of offload a lot of their 3 of the 5 that are involved in the flexor tendon or originating from there, right? And but they're all innervated by a nerve, and I think that's what's really important, right? And it's, you know, the ulnar nerve innervates, I think, one of them or half of another, and then you have the medial nerve and median nerve. And why this is so crucial to even just talk about that briefly, right, is because when you're thinking of this concept, right, and saying like, hey, I can't train the ligament, I can't train the bone aspect, right? I can create some thickening in the ligament. I can, you know, I guess harden the bone a little bit, but like, that's probably already happened, right? So really, at the end of the day, you're taking this one aspect where, you know, not only are you able to showcase people, hey, this is the current strength you have in here by testing, but now we can actually train these muscles at the same time.
Spot on. So you stole the words right from me. FlexPro Grip is both a testing and training device. Yeah. So it's moving on from what we have seen across the industry of assessing where you are in a given moment. Mm-hmm. Great. Now what do I do about it?
Right.
So we tried to bridge that gap by creating training systems that are focused on strength, which we use on the injury prevention and rehab side, rate of force development, which is our real performance side. Mm-hmm. And then endurance is where we bridge the gap. How do we take our strength and make sure an athlete can apply that strength repeatedly over time, get used to producing that force more rapidly, more often, to eventually push them to what we're doing with rate of force development and pitch design. Mm-hmm. Then we go farther and we have rehab protocols and we have readiness protocols. And what we think is kind of unique is the way we have our app and our system set up when we work with people like you guys at VeloU or some of our college or pro clients. We have it set up where they can create their own protocols to chase something that is
solve unique problems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If for whatever reason you guys at VeloU want to look at the combination of index finger strength and pinky strength because we're just like huge classic rock fans, sweet, let's dig into it and we'll set up a protocol for you.
Yep.
Like we wanted to create that customization so people can solve the problems that they want to solve.
Yeah. And so one of the first things that really attracted me to this was the fact that I can, you know, like just breaking down sequentially what most people use products like this for is, hey, I want to know where I stand, right? Mm-hmm. To make sure that I'm capable of handling the load or stress that I'm about to apply to myself or that I just applied, right? And how did I recover from that? Right. And then I think the next piece is the fact that I don't have to go anywhere else to train it, right? Like I don't have to go and get a different apparatus to now train it. I don't have to go to a gym now to train this aspect. I can actually take the information I just got and now apply it. And not only am I applying it, I'm applying it based off the information I just got.
Right.
And the system is automatically doing that for me, which I think is grossly underappreciated in the sense that it's taking a lot of the nuance of needing to be educated on what am I seeing from this app? What is the readiness? What is it telling me? And it's then also implying to the athlete, like, look, this is what it's saying. This is what you need to do coming off of this to train and be prepared for the next time. And I think that's quite possibly one of the things that drew me the most to it, was having that potential. And then we continued the conversation, which is what I'm really excited about, is to see it's not just like, hey, okay, this is an injury preventative tool, right? Because ultimately that's the training we're talking about right there, right? It's hey, let's strengthen these things. Let's improve the neuromuscular capacity of this. Let's get an understanding of how we can actually improve these few stabilizing muscles that are going to aid in this process. And then the next piece is like, hey, wait a minute, we can actually improve performance.
Right. Yeah, what's so strange, and I can raise my Boy Scout flag and say, like, I thought prevention would sell. Prevention doesn't matter to anyone.
They're not afraid yet.
No, they're not. You're not afraid until it's happened to you,
which
is really
sad. Or
sad.
Somebody close enough. Yeah,
it's really sad. Thankfully, my partner Daryl understood that because he worked in healthcare for a while, so he was able to push back on me a little bit with that one, and lead us to diving more into the performance side and understanding it. Because of course, I think like injury took me out, so I think, like, oh, well, if we can lower that injury rate, people will be all over it.
Right.
What we quickly learned in professional baseball, even high school and college kids, like, no, what's going to get me better? What's going to get me seen? What's going to get me to the next level?
Yeah.
And that's the performance pieces. So the way we try to tackle that with individuals, as you said, so the readiness. What we're concerned about with readiness is not so much what your max forces are, but it's your ability to repeat your max forces throughout a week or throughout a season and seeing the ranges that you're creating across reps. And if you're falling out of a certain range or a certain average, like, hey man, we're not going to tell you don't pitch today, but you should probably be smart about the way you go about it. Is it dedicating extra time to your warm-up routine? Is it making sure you just get extra sleep tonight so you are recovered? Is it dedicating more time to hydrating? Right. Is it little things that you can do to add that little extra prep before you get on the field and compete?
Sure.
And then going a little further on the individualization side that you started to bring up, like, yeah, we're not going to give the single most individualized program to everyone in the room right now or everybody who has FlexPro Grip. But the way we individualize is by my grip profile is different from your grip profile.
Sure.
And it's different from every kid in the nation right now. And all of their target forces and reps, it's based on what force they produce and how they produce it. So the rep scheme, unless we're really getting specific on something, is pretty much going to be the same. Mm-hmm. But the way we ask an athlete to reach that force and hold that force, that's where it changes. And that's where we can really individualize to support the specific athlete.
Very cool. So, coming off of that, right, in our discussions, you guys then brought up to me, hey, we actually think there's potential with this thing to impact pitch design and pitch movement profiles, spin rate. And if, any of you listening are aware, spin rate generally correlates pretty well to velocity as they both migrate in the same fashion, mm-hmm. right? And pitch design has become incredibly impactful over the last couple of years with the emergence of TrackMan's information and the trust that we can put into that. And so why don't you speak a little bit to the study we're actually going to be conducting all together this summer? Yeah,
now this is the really exciting stuff, right? Like you said, spin rate is correlated well to velocity. The mm-hmm. two move together.
Yeah.
We had this offline discussion yesterday, and we talked about spin rate, we were asked the question like, oh, is that the thing that pitchers are chasing? My response to it was, it kind of came and went to a certain extent.
Yep.
And I think it came and went just because guys realized they couldn't make it move. They couldn't get it to change unless they put pine tar on their fingers or put glue or something to actually increase the friction of them gripping the ball to increase spin. Because there's only two known ways to increase spin. Throw harder, but that doesn't improve your spin to velocity ratio or your Bauer units. It's just you threw harder, so your spin went up.
Yep.
Or it's increased friction.
Yep.
There's a little known other way, and it's increased force in what is called the tangential direction. But to spare everyone of the fancy science, it's pretty much your ability to pull down with your fingers. If you're thinking about a traditional fastball with pure backspin,
Yep.
pull down with your fingers to create more rapid backspin of the ball. And that isn't created by more strength. It's created by applying that strength more rapidly. So your rate of force development.
Yep.
And we know that if we can increase rate of force development, we can impart more spin. We know that if we can impart more spin, we have more potential for movement.
Yep.
Now, that's sticking to what it looks like on paper.
Sure.
Granted, there's so many things that we can still learn about how athletes actually do this on a mound, throwing a ball to home plate. But in the preliminary research we did so far with 8 minor leaguers during their Arizona Complex League season last year, they had a 4% increase in their Bauer units or their spin to velocity ratio,
Right.
which results for them in about 125 to 150 RPMs on their fastball. And that's about an inch and a half of movement.
Which is incredible when you think about how, minute the adjustments need to be to take a guy's pitch from being a normal or above average pitch to an outlier, right? And this, in between that 70 and 80 score in terms of that 2080 threshold on actual pitches, right? And, you're talking an inch to an inch and a half totally changes a guy's career. Now, when we're coming back to high school and college guys, right? That sort of stringent look at their metrics probably isn't being done at these younger ages, which is totally fine and probably not necessary, right? Mm-hmm. But let's talk about the other impacts to this, right? Because just because I have more spin and theoretically I have a higher ceiling, right, doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to understand how to control that or understand how to manipulate it in a correct way. Right. But if I can start to develop that at a younger age and I can start to understand how to impart more spin and how to, elicit force at a very accurate and precise time, right? Intent timing, then theoretically I will have more time to learn this, understand this, understand how to utilize it. And I think that's why this is so cool. Obviously, our large population is high school and college. So I'm excited to get a lot of these young guys just creating a better relationship. I know it sounds weird, but with their fingers.
Yes.
Because if we just have to look at like the throw in and of itself, right? We're creating the fastest action in the world at the shoulder, right? And then as you've indicated in our offline chats, the second fastest is actually when my fingers impart that sort of force on the ball. And what I find so interesting in that is so many of these kids struggle to manipulate a ball correctly. And if we can create a lot of this sort of awareness of what their hand is doing, what their wrist is doing, how they're imparting this force at a young age, just think about the amount of reps they can get in by the time they actually need to focus on a lot of those aspects, in their, early college years to create a differentiating pitch.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy, this rabbit hole that we're now going to be able to create for people to go down.
Yeah.
Right. This is a new tool in the toolbox. We're not saying FlexPro Grip is the end all be all, and if you use it, you're guaranteed to be a 10-time All-Star Hall of Famer and go down as one of the greatest pitchers ever. But it's the same thing with the introduction of the radar gun, the introduction of ball tracking technology.
Yep.
We gave players and coaches a new platform with those technologies to chase what matters in the game of baseball.
Yep.
And find who outliers are.
You give them a metric too.
Exactly.
You give them something to chase.
Creating, people might say there's so much technology in the game that they get bogged down. They don't know where to go. But ultimately, these metrics enable athletes who we might not have been able to see compete at these levels before. It can give them an opportunity.
100%.
And putting FlexPro Grip in the hands of the right players and the right coaches who understand how to use this as a tool, not a full across the board development solution as this is your ticket, but as a tool to aid them in the pitch development process or understand how their fingers interact with the baseball and apply that higher ceiling and actually work towards it to create more arm side movement or glove side movement.
Right.
Because going back to what we did with the minor league group, that was with no cueing or coaching with those guys.
Right.
They were told to come in and train on FlexPro Grip, and we told them that our goal is for you to do this, and hopefully we see an increase in spin rate.
Right.
That's the coaching that they got. They understood what protocol to do, and they did it.
Right.
But now when we work with guys like you or the people we're going to have in our group in Northwest Ohio doing this study, we're going to have coaches alongside these athletes looking at the profiles that they already create with their pitches and say like, yo, you know what would be really sweet is if we took this ride fastball that you're throwing and got a little glove side movement to it. If we can throw high ride cutters, you're going to be unbelievable.
Yeah.
Because imagine taking the 86 to 88 mile per hour kid that you see nonstop. He's an elite high school player.
Yep.
But in college, he's average.
Yeah.
And we can take that kid, give him an outlier cutter.
Right.
And who knows what his new career trajectory is.
Right. Totally. Yeah. It makes a ton of sense. Let's go into a little bit of exactly what they're going to be doing in this study.
Yeah. Okay. So what we are after with this study is rate of force development.
Okay.
The reason we're after rate of force development, as we said, is we are trying to improve the speed at which they can apply force to the baseball to impart more spin and eventually more movement. So what we care about, is improving their data on FlexPro Grip and their numbers. That's all well and good. But ultimately, we want to improve what they're showing on a TrackMan unit.
Okay.
So once a week, once every 2 weeks, we want guys to be able to throw a high intent pen where we are assessing the changes to their pitch metrics. Now, what we're focused on right now is fastballs, whether it's sinkers, four seams, cutters, just the traditional fastball repertoire is what we care about most. That's not to say that we don't care about breaking pitches and what we can do there, but you know how studies work. You kind of need to get specific for what you're chasing.
Yeah.
So this 8-week period, we're going to have guys do a quick onboarding so they develop somewhat of a strength base to try to reduce some early soreness or fatigue that they might experience in these muscles that they've never used before of their fingers and forearm, and just track over time. It really is pretty simple. We have a rate of force development test and we have rate of force development training. Now, what we're going to ask for people like you or your other coaches to sit with an athlete, look at their current movement plot on a TrackMan and say, you know what? I think we should really chase ride of your fastball. We should try to lean into that induced vertical break. Or like, hey, you're kind of throwing dead zone, but we know you're kind of a natural pronator. Let's lean into that sinker. And instead of throwing seam shift wake sinkers, we can throw a spin-induced sinker. And we know from Dr. Alan Nathan, without going down the seam shift wake rabbit hole, spin can result in greater movement than seam and air effects.
Sure.
And we're not saying seam and air effects don't matter. What we're saying is if you can learn to combine those two,
Right.
your ceiling for movement has just gone even higher.
Yeah. So what's so intriguing about this, right, is that it's basically going to cause a ton more problems, which it excites me. And like, it just creates all these other questions that we have to answer and all these other ways, because also too, we can tell individual finger, right? So index and middle, we can tell how they're imparting force, right? And which is imparting it equal, or is it not equal? Are they heavier on the middle? Are they heavier on the, and it can answer a lot of questions for guys too, giving an actual number to it, right? So like what I mean by that is, you know, we can watch on a high-speed camera a guy's middle finger slip underneath on a pitch, and you know him, you know, be imparting just primarily from that index or something along those lines, right? And we can infer what might be happening. But now at this point, we're going to actually have the capacity to basically say to him, yeah, look, like on this middle finger, like you're at, you know, I don't know, 25% more force that you're imparting as opposed to on the index. And I know we've talked offline, but you've seen most of the guys that have been able to truly backspin a ball have equal distribution of force,
right,
and rate of force development. So it's just intriguing to how we can utilize this as not just a tool for readiness, not just a tool for injury prevention, but as a true opportunity in conjunction with other tools to actually change the pitch profile, the ability of this athlete. And I think that is so incredibly important for people to understand that it can actually have the potential to do all three of those things.
Yeah, I mean, hearing you say it's really cool. I kind of had like the kid in the candy store moment right there, because we are at a point now where we can have these conversations. I can come on this podcast with you, and I know that others are sharing the vision of what Daryl and I had for so long with FlexPro Grip. And like, we're a team of 3 right now on our side. So it's Daryl and I, and we have one other employee. His name's Gavin. And the 3 of us have obviously believed in this for however long. I mean, as we said earlier, it's been a 4-week mission turned into a 4-year project.
Yeah.
And hearing you say exactly what's going through our head, we can go beyond just testing an athlete and give him training. We can go beyond training an athlete just to stay healthy and help him improve performance. It feels so exciting to know that we're on the path of when I set out my original goal, when my playing career ended, to be able to help athletes. I feel like we're on that mission right now.
Yeah. And, you know, I commend Daryl for overemphasizing the necessity to improve performance. You know, when I first got into this many, many years ago, I was actually somebody that denounced the use of like weighted implements, because I just thought, you know, the risk reward just isn't there.
We were there too, trust me.
Yeah, and it's
full circle.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's partly naiveness, right? It's partly who and how the research was being conducted. And you know, it's partly not feeling confident enough to push the envelope, right? Because ultimately at the end of the day, that's our true objective in order to create performance improvement, right? We need to discover where that line is. We need to discover how to push it. We need to discover, but then also it was not fully understanding the mechanisms behind what is trying to be done. And yes, obviously we've made full circle there, right? We sell our own rewire balls now at this point, but I think what's so amazing, and it was a remark that I made in, I think, a presentation, 6-7 years ago, where I said, we're going to lose the battle of injury prevention if that's all we scream. We can scream it from the mountaintops. These kids are not going to listen. Doesn't matter, right? The only thing they hear is, I need to throw harder. I need to throw better. I need more metrics. The injury is that's just something that occurs, and I'm not going to think about that because that's called a consequence, right? And that's a negative consequence. And yes, I commend them for being able to keep that out of their brain and just push forward. But they do it to a point of almost naiveness that it can occur, right? And I think if we like this device, and it's really a lot of what we try and do in our training practices, if you can cloak injury prevention, health, under the guides of performance improvement, right? Then you have won, because you will attract an enormous following, but be able to actually get them to do what they need to do and stay healthy. But if you do it just from the guides of, this is what you need to do or else, just think about what every kid hears when they hear those statements.
Right. And without a doubt, I commend those kids who can have it out of their brain. Mm-hmm. I dealt with injury in my career before the shoulder ultimately took me out of it. But when you can play free, there's nothing like it. Yeah. If you even have a thought that injury is going to happen, how can you perform?
Right.
You can't. So you said it perfectly. If we can cloak injury prevention with improving performance, with getting better, with this is something that can actually help you get to the next level and achieve your goals, then we are winning the battle. Because the farthest thing from what I want to be is a fear monger and tell a kid that you're going to get hurt. You have to use this.
Right.
No.
Well, it's not going to matter. It's not going to matter.
No.
They know the stats. They understand how many people get. But here's the problem. Ready? You know why that's never going to win? It's never going to win because you have 31% of the MLB getting a UCL surgery every year. That's why it's never going to win. Because the guys on TV are still getting hurt. Mm-hmm. So if they're still getting hurt, why is the kid in high school going to pay attention to the injury prevention of that? Right?
Yes.
And so, yes, there is this line that we toe. And what is that percentage of how many guys need to get hurt to understand, are we pushing that line? It's probably not 31%. It probably needs to be significantly lower than that. Should it be eradicated? Probably not. We won't know where the line is. But to that point, we need to get these kids to understand that they're not a professional as well. So their body is totally different. It's not fully mature. They are going to experience forces in extremely different ways, and they're not experienced with understanding what pain feels like at the same time. So getting them into a device like this at a young age, getting them to understand what it feels like to recognize when I am ready, when I'm not ready, how that feels, what that looks like, what the score is, it becomes this situation where you can do, which is why we're so intrigued by it, right? It empowers the athlete to make a logical decision for themselves. They don't need influence from anybody else. They can literally make the logical decision for themselves, and you empower them to take control of their career.
Yes, and this goes back to another offline discussion we had yesterday. It's their career. It's not ours. Mm-hmm. We're just here to help. We're here to be the tour guide. We're here to be the GPS. Mm-hmm. Whatever really awesome metaphor we want to throw on it, we know that we're just a helping hand in the process.
Yep.
And that's all we want to be. We don't want to dominate their career. They have the right to make the decision that they want to make.
Right.
And
yeah, I mean, when you see scenarios like that, it's that, God-fearing ideology, or the, it's the ego-driven ideology, right? The coach actually has the ego about how successful the kid is because he feels as though he imparted all of that along this individual, right? Forgetting the fact that you can't beat genetics at the end of the day. So you're going to be chasing down that rabbit hole the most. But so, getting back on pace here, I I'm incredibly excited to go down all these different rabbit holes that are gonna open up from this study. In addition, we're going to be collecting an enormous amount of other data in addition to this, and seeing what actually does correlate over at the same time, especially from the systemic standpoint. We're going to try and get everybody that's in the study to be on some sort of sleep tracker or some level of nutrition base, and see where we can understand other factors that might be influencing this as well. So I'm just excited to open up all these different rabbit holes, and feel incredibly privileged to be a part of the beginning stages of this, because as the data starts to pour in from not just this study, but all the different people that are already using this tool, it's only going to get better and better as new questions start to emerge. Yes,
that's really it. We're scratching the surface. We know that there's so much to be discovered. I mean, we created a new technology, which I think is awesome. I'm really proud of it. We put a lot of effort and hard work into it. But as you said, this is only going to create more problems, not in a bad sense, but it's more problems that need to be solved. Totally. Or it's opening the door to better understand, how do we place an athlete who is in the 70th percentile for grip?
Right.
Like, what does that mean? What is that grip? What does that do? Is there a ceiling? How does he improve it? And I think that's really cool that we're going to give more athletes more information to give them the chance to become who they actually want to become.
Yeah. Again, thank you so much for coming, and I am really excited to do a follow-up to this, obviously after, and once we can crunch, we have some smart people that'll crunch all this information and and let us know, like, hey, what came out of this, right? And so thank you again, and I'm really looking forward to the follow-up.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate all the hospitality coming out here, and look forward to coming out again sometime this summer.
Cool.